Aadhar card and privacy. That's what we're going to talk about. It's a fabulous topic. I think it's one of those less understood topics. I'm going to chart the whole time through history. So what happened for this? Right? So, way back in 2009, the government started on this UIDAI project, which we started collecting data to the idea for giving each Indian a unique identification number came into being. Then the project went about for a good 6-7 years without any legislation. So there was no government mandated law which backed data collection from the period from 2009 to 2016. So that's a serious issue, because the government was collecting data and biometric data for a long time from people without any legal backing for it. And so why is this an issue? Because one, there is some invasion to privacy that is here, because biometric data is involved, and the government was reasonably powerfully coercing people. It was never the mandated, but there were rumors flying around, there was pressure, that it was communicated that public subsidies would be available only if you had an Aadhaar, and all kinds of machinations were being done to collect data. When at long last in 2016, the government passed the Aadhar Law and Act, which gave the legislative backdrop for this data collection. And so the Aadhar project itself has its merits. That is undeniable. And so for public distribution of services, for giving benefits, for tracking with bank accounts, for all of that, there are benefits. And we're not discussing the merits or demerits of Aadhaar and unique identification scheme. We're discussing Aadhaar in the context of privacy. That's very vital. And so we're not doing whether Aadhaar card is useful. Obviously it's useful, no doubt about it. Is it an invasion of privacy, or has privacy been pushed? Have they pushed the boundaries there? That's what we're discussing. Right? In 2016, when the legal framework was put in, there were a bunch of issues. So lots of legal experts were scratching their heads, and lots of people filed cases because the Aadhaar card said, more or less said, was trampling on the rights to privacy. And so the Aadhaar card could collect biometric data. They could share it with private enterprises. The government could store it. There's no framework that said the government can legally collect biometric data. Right? And access was given to a large variety of government services. The door was kept open for private sector to tap into it. And there was no Data Protection Act in India in place. And the arbiter for any data protection, data security was again Aadhaar or UIDAI. So if there was a breach, it was up to them to control. There was no third-party validation of data protection that was mandated by law. And so this was a weird law. Obviously, it was contested heavily. Right? Another funny thing happened. It was passed as a money bill so that it could avoid the process of going through the Rajya Sabha. It was a backdoor entry by many ways. So obviously, it was contested, and it dragged on in courts for a while. Right? In between this, there was a right to privacy, which the Supreme Court formally identified and reinforced in 2017. Right? That was not part of the mainstream Aadhaar proceedings, but was a big fillip to the case against Aadhaar. Because the government argued that there was no right to privacy that Indians had. The Supreme Court came down and said it is contained within the Constitution. So the Supreme Court came out and accepted and acknowledged the right to privacy, which was a big deal. Right? Then in 2018, when the Aadhaar card's legality came up, and the Supreme Court said, in the interest of the collective, some individual rights could be sacrificed. That's a gist of it. And so there may be, though they did not say how, they did not say that the individual's right to privacy was sacrosanct. There was no means by which your fingerprints could be taken in. They did not say that. They said, because the collective utility value from this, what the government and machinery can give to the people, is so high that we take the view that this can be passed through. Right? A couple of points here. They said a lot of things in the judgment. I'm going to highlight two things. One was a clear dissent opinion. One of the judges came out and said this is wrong. This is a fraud on the Constitution. Aadhaar is not legally tenable. It should not have been passed as a money bill. It violates privacy. He was unambiguous about it. Second thing, the judgment, even though it said, look, the government can pass the Aadhaar Act, it had a bunch of guidelines and said that the law should be firmed up, that it should be, there should be data protection that should be enshrined legally. The people, anybody, any government agency willing to interested in accessing Aadhaar should have a senior member present and possibly require judge approval. So they put layer after layer of restriction. And one thing they were clear about was private sector should not be given access to this. Very recently, as recently as 2019, the government has amended the law, put another version of it and rushed it through. This incorporates a bunch of suggestions the judges have said, but the one critical thing is now private sector companies have the option of using Aadhaar as an identity verification. And so when the law is being debated, private sector, the communication was clear. Private sector would not be allowed, could not take Aadhaar as ID proof. Now they can. And so the government interpreted this as that they had to modify the law to permit them to do it. Right? The government has made it not mandatory but retained it as voluntary. But there's a thin line between voluntary and mandatory. And the government is saying that all of the telecom companies can use predominantly 3 options for verifying data. One is going to be Aadhaar, another is e-Aadhaar or variant of Aadhaar. The third one is going to be passport. Apart from this, anything new the government can pass, they can use. So if government does not pass anything new, effectively telecom companies can use Aadhaar or passports. Like minuscule percentage of Indians have passports. So government is mandating Aadhaar in a very roundabout fashion. So the government is pushing this through, and this is a reasonably serious violation of privacy. And so the right to privacy is now enshrined, and there's a thin line between what is data that is useful and how it can automatically be seen as almost a police state. And the government is more or less saying that in the interest of the collective, individual rights to privacy be damned. And that is unambiguous in the way the government has treated this Aadhaar legislation throughout. As a backdoor passing of the law, it was through a money bill. They fought tooth and nail to make sure that the privacy angle for the government using it be removed. And then now through the backdoor, they've said private sector can also use Aadhaar. And so the uses of Aadhaar are high, but the privacy of individual has been more or less completely been trampled upon. And so again, we're not discussing whether there are merits to Aadhaar. We're only thinking about Aadhaar and privacy. Right? And in the Indian context, great sections of the government can access Aadhaar. Government, in case of a national security emergency, can access individual persons' biometric records without requiring extraordinarily high approval. So anything that you will find in a surveillance state is already present thanks to our Aadhaar. It is more or less mandating it through the back door, and it will allow private sector access to Aadhaar as a means of ID checking and verification. So that privacy versus Aadhaar, there is no contest. Privacy has been completely trampled upon, and Aadhaar will now exist. Right? So lots of very interesting stuff is there to be read about this. The one standout set of articles that I found are beautifully well written, were written by this gentleman called Suhrit Parthasarathi. He's written for the Hindustan Times and the Hindu, a bunch of other publications. So we'll give you the links, very useful, go through them. The dissent piece by, I think the justice name is Mr. Chandrachud Singh, is also very good. Go through that. If you want more depth, go through the links. But Aadhaar versus privacy, Aadhaar is a clear winner. Privacy has been trampled upon in our country through a series of measures by the government, and that is unambiguous. There are a bunch of other videos that are there in this, where we talk about several other current affairs topics. Go through them, they're on the playlist. Best wishes for your interview preparation.